Hey there, everybody. You're almost there. Hi. We're going to start. We have to get the energy up because it's like the last presentation. And I know how hard it is to sit here. So, everybody stand up for a second. It'll only take a second. We're just going to do a quick round of introductions. We'll start over. I'm just kidding. Loud noises are a great way to get the energy up. So we're going to try and do two things really quickly. We're going to try and get in sync and then end at the same time. So what we're going to do is this. We do that? Ready? Everybody? We're going to keep doing it over and over again until I call it quits. And if we get in rhythm and end on the same time, we're going to call that a success and get to cocktails even faster. Ready? You guys are pretty good at this. Right out of the gate. Keep going. Keep going. Pretty good. All right. All right. That is also known as buying time for the crew in the back to get my PowerPoint presentation up and running, which I'm sure is almost there, but also energy is really important. As we get started here, I'm very excited to be here, not just at the show, not just with PFL, but I got to check Montana off my state list, which is huge. This has been the first time that there are only like 8 or 9 left, so it's a big deal when I get to check one off. And I don't think if we could do this show in Alaska next year, I would happily come back again. This has been. It's been great to spend a little bit of time with folks today and certainly get to see a lot of folks that I've known for some time. And as Marnie mentioned, I am the Chief Customer Officer of Marketo, but I really grew up and spent most of my time in Marketo in marketing. And why that is relevant to this discussion is that we all know that the world of marketing is changing and the scope is increasing. But one of those areas where it is happening most acutely is in the world of how marketers approach our customers. Not our prospects, not trying to acquire new customers, but what is the role of marketing as we try to go out and engage our existing customer base. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. I'm going to share some of the insights and data that we see when we look across our entire customer base and what they're doing today, as well as a framework that we've started to use and started to leverage to help improve how marketing teams can engage not just prospects, but our existing customer base. But first, a warning potentially, if we can get going. The deck works great, but the clicker is not doing so well. You know what? I like to do the point, like this has any bearing whatsoever, to point it at the monitor and then see if it'll go. The warning that I wanted to share is that this presentation does contain both babies and puppies. And if anybody isn't a fan of babies or puppies, it's cool if you just want to leave now. We'll all watch you and judge you a little bit, but any excuse to include a dog, generally my own dog, in the presentation. This is Whiskey is her name. Don't judge me. Well, you can judge me a little bit, but she'll make an appearance or two today. So just fair word of warning there. The question that I want to. Okay, cool. There's a car in the parking lot with the lights on. I'm just kidding. We're going to play PowerPoint karaoke here in a little bit. It'll be fun for all of us, I promise. So the question that we get asked a lot from marketing teams these days is around customer engagement and customer experience far beyond acquisition, I mentioned. And one of the theoretical questions it poses is customer loyalty a thing? What does it mean? How much should we be thinking about it or caring about it? Does it really matter, whether I am treating my customers with the same level of love and attention that I'm treating my prospects and trying to acquire new customers? And I'll share only one stat that I think paints a really clear picture here, and that is that 81% of organizations say that they expect to be competing mostly or completely on the basis of customer experience. just take a step back. You may be mired in your day-to-day where you're like, yeah, duh, we think about this all the time. Our customer experience is critical. But if you were to ask this question just 10 years ago, inevitably you would have gotten answers like, no, product. We're competing on the basis of our product and how differentiated it is. You wouldn't have heard somebody say, forget the product. It is all about the customer experience. Much less, you wouldn't hear 81% of people say that that is the most important thing that they are going to compete on for their companies. And there's a lot of reasons why this has happened. Switching costs are lower now than ever before. Generally, I don't want to burst your bubble, but you probably have competitors out there. Is that true? Do most of you have competitors out there? I'm kidding, that was a sarcastic question. Of course you do. Everybody has competitors, and they're easy to switch to these days because we live in a world of technology and on-demand and SaaS. And so if switching costs are low, that can be a challenge. The other piece of it is customer expectations are so incredibly high. Customers demand more from us. They have been conditioned by a world of Uber and Netflix and on-demand satisfaction that they expect from every company they engage with. And so it doesn't take much to not live up to those expectations with customers. And so everybody says we've got to compete on the basis of customer experience, but it's harder and harder every day to do that. And then the second question as it relates to this room is, who is responsible inside your company for doing that? Well, in certain companies, they make ridiculous decisions to create roles called Chief Customer Officer, and clearly my job or somebody's job that has that title is responsible for thinking about it. But in most organizations, off my own slides, in most organizations, 52% of organizations say that marketing and marketers are expected to own customer experience in their organization. Do you guys feel like you have at least a big hand in customer experience in your organizations? This is another one of those where 10 years ago, very few people in the audience would have raised their hand around whether marketing as a function was the owner or a huge participant in the customer experience, because it was about brand and customer acquisition and not customer experience. So we've got this world where customer experience is critical. Marketers own it. The harsh reality is marketers are probably splitting their time between a number of things, including customer experience. But the question is, are we doing a good job? If we do own it and we are driving this, are marketers doing a good job of delivering a customer experience? Well, the good news is, if you ask marketers, the answer is yes. 83% of marketers believe that their customer engagement efforts are effective. So we're good. We can call it quits here. Shorter presentation than you were expecting. Unfortunately, only 33% of customers even believe that brands are trying to deliver value. And so even if we own it, even if we're trying to drive it, our customers don't feel like we are. And that's a pretty significant issue. What we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about is a bit of a framework to help us get there. Where can we have an impact as marketers driving customer experience in our organization? And it's based on what we see across our customer base of 5,000 customers. The most common thing that our customers at Marketo have been trying to do is grow into this world of customer experience. We're at a world now where for the past 10 years, people have been putting marketing technologies and marketing automation in place, and they've got their lead management process down, and they're acquiring new customers, and they're thinking about putting ABM in place. The nut they haven't cracked is, how do they extend those efforts to their customer base? How do they deliver the experience that their customers are demanding, because they know they're on the hook for it? And so when we look across that base, what we see leaders in the group doing is following a framework. We created the framework. They told us what they were doing, and we put it into a framework so we could actually talk about it and look really smart. We love looking really smart. And we're going to talk about the framework today, but this is all based on the feedback and the input that we get from our customers. And as basic as it sounds, it really comes down to focusing on three things. And the reason it's new and different is because it's the three things that most marketers are not focusing on today, or at least they're doing it in a different order. And that is to listen to our customers first, use all we know about them from that listening to learn and glean insights about our customers that we wouldn't otherwise have, and then use that to engage them. Versus the historical approach to marketing, which is, I'm a brand, I've got a message I want to get out there, let's launch a campaign, and we'll think about customers after the fact. That's the big change here that we have to drive through as marketers and as marketing organizations. So let's start first by listening to what our customers do. What does that even mean? We listen to customers all day long, have conversations. I had a number of conversations with customers here. It's the benefit of having a bunch of customers in one place at one time. But when it comes to doing that at scale, what it really means is how do we listen to what our customers are doing to learn more about them and engage them more effectively? Quick pop quiz, survey for the audience. What percentage of customers, or companies I should say, what percentage of companies say that they can get a complete view of their customer from all available data sources today? Shout them out. Give me a percentage. 5%. 12. Wisdom of the crowd. Everybody agrees with 5. Others? I'm kind of liking 0. Yeah. That's a good shill. Yeah. Well, now we're getting philosophical. This is going to take a minute. Yeah. That's right. Well, this is a marketer saying, I've got a complete view of my customer from all the available data sources at my fingerprints. It's not quite 0, but it's pretty darn bad. 6%. 6%. So that means you guys, if my math is right, no, probably even less than you guys, you three. You three have a complete view of your customer from all available data sources, I hope. And the rest of you don't. So you don't have to, guys don't have to pay attention anymore. It's just this part of the room I'm going to talk to from here on out. It's such a low number because we've been overwhelmed by data. We have more data at our fingertips than we know what to do with these days. The problem is not having not enough data. The problem is having way too much data and deciding how we're going to bring it together. So what marketers have done, first and foremost, is they've been blasting campaigns out for a long time. And so the data that we've all lived and died by is how are people responding to my campaigns? But that's not really the data that tells us anything about our customers. And so the first thing to do is to look across the company. If you're a marketer that is going to drive the customer experience, you have to look across all the data that probably already exists inside your company, not just the marketing insights you might glean about who's coming to what web pages, what ads are they clicking on, what direct mail pieces are they responding to, but all of the non-marketing touch points as well. What conversations are they having with a sales or a customer support person? How are they using a product? Are they consuming educational content or looking for help? We know so much about our customers today if we could just bring it together in one place. And that's what listening is all about. Because as marketers, we haven't taken that step back and said, if we really think about it, we know what our customers want. But if we're going to operationalize it, if we're going to act on it, we've got to bring it together into one place. Because when you have that full 360-degree view of your customers, you can take much better action on it. Puppies and babies. I warned you that this would be coming. How do we do this as marketers? Let me just tell you a quick story for a second. This is my older kid. He's now slightly older than that, not a lot. His name's Lincoln, and this is the infamous dog, Whiskey. And as you can see from this picture, Whiskey is a tad bit skeptical of Lincoln. This was right about the time that he started moving. And she was already neurotic. And so a neurotic dog and a moving child, lots of questions. We'll talk more about that later. But when I saw this picture, I realized it didn't just describe the relationship between my kid and my dog. It perfectly describes the relationship between marketing and IT. For years, marketing has been in this world where they could go out and swipe a credit card and put a new marketing technology in place. 10 years ago, marketing was wholly reliant on IT to put new technology in place. So we were totally reliant on IT. All of a sudden, the wonderful world of SaaS marketing technologies came around, and we swung the needle all the way over here and said, we don't need IT anymore. We can do this ourselves. And that works to a point. But if we go back to all those data sources you probably have sitting inside your company and wanting to bring them together to get a full and complete view of your customer, you have to partner with IT to do it. This isn't something marketing can do on an island anymore. And one last note when it comes to listening to your customers, if you have to prioritize the data that you're looking at, things that people do, behavioral data, way more impactful than what they say or what you can buy. And so if you're prioritizing how you're going to listen to your customers, listening to what they're doing in the moment, what websites they're going to, what emails they are responding to, all of that data is 10 times richer than the data that might give you a job title or a company size. Because I can have the same job title and work at a company of equal size and have radically different care-abouts and goals than my peer at the other company. But if I'm looking at specific products that you might sell, that's going to tell you a lot more about what I'm going to be interested in and what you can engage me with. A great example of this, I just love to share this story, because the Detroit Pistons as a basketball team, not great, but their marketing department is amazing, it turns out. They're owned by Palace Sports and Entertainment, big entertainment conglomerate that owns stadiums and the team and so on. And they've driven a pretty intensive effort to bring all of their data together because, as you can imagine, very siloed. Who's going to a Pistons game over here? Who might be attending a Taylor Swift concert over here? Understanding that about a person is very impactful. And when it comes to the Pistons themselves, after they brought all of this data together, they learned one critically important fact that impacted all of their marketing efforts from that day forward. And that is, what do you think the number one thing that a Pistons fan would want to see if you're trying to engage them with a marketing campaign? Any guesses? What do you think really is going to hook a Pistons fan? Free tickets, that would do it, yeah. Giving away free stuff would always do it. No, it turns out the number one thing is knowing who the recipient's favorite player was. They didn't know that until they brought all of this data together and could actually start to incorporate it in these campaigns. But when they knew who the favorite player was and incorporated that in all of their marketing, it had a hugely powerful impact because people are way more responsive because it's about them. It's what they want to see. It's not about selling Pistons tickets at first. It's about engaging them with something they're interested in, their favorite player. Okay, so you bring all this data together, and I just gave you an example of one small insight that can be gleaned, but I wanted to tell you one more story about a organization that has done this well. You can't learn if your data is in a bunch of different silos if you can't bring it together. So you got to build that complete picture. And McKinsey has a great quote that talks about how many companies have basically the elements of a relatively complete customer picture, but it lives in all these different silos. We talked a little bit about that. But Laureate Education is an educational brand, a company that owns a number of universities. If you haven't heard of Laureate, you've probably heard of one of the universities that's kind of under their umbrella. And if you think about, for some of us way back, when you were applying for colleges, the number of interactions you might have with a university before you decide to enroll there is significant. You're going to receive mail from them, a lot of mail sometimes. You're going to talk to an admissions counselor. You're going to apply. You're going to be on their website. You're going to be doing research. You're going to be talking to financial aid. Tons and tons and tons of touch points because it takes someone a long time to decide where they're going to go to school and commit that time and those resources. And so Laureate had all of this coming together, and they were trying to glean some insights out of it. They were starting to learn what campaigns were working and how they were going to actually drive someone from a little bit of interest in the university all the way through to being an actual student. And what it turns out was most impactful for them is that when you're trying to learn about your customers, it can't be the charter of one person in the organization. I'm going to say that again. It can't be the charter of one person in the organization. You can't have an analytics team in your marketing department that's sitting in some back room that is responsible for knowing everything about your customers. The way that Laureate cracked this code, what they learned was that once they brought this all together, they had to democratize the learning. They needed every single marketer in their organization learning new and unique things about their customer, learning what was working. And so it wasn't just about bringing all the data together and learning, it was about making sure that everyone in their marketing org could learn. Because that's when it became powerful. When everybody was running campaigns based on some new and unique learning, it was way more powerful than going to one person to tell them everything they needed to know about their customer base. And an example of this was they had this problem they were facing where they had a number of students who applied, who would put down a small deposit, who would commit. They would send all the signals that they were going to commit to going to one of the Laureate institutions. But then this funny thing would happen with a small group of students. They wouldn't actually attend. They would just kind of write off the deposit and either decide not to go to school or decide to go to another school. And they started digging into that and kind of peeling back the layers. And it turns out, once they had this complete view of the customer, they found this interesting correlation that once somebody was accepted, If they could get them to just register for one class, pick one class that they were interested in, show a little bit of interest in one specific area, it was a significant increase in the likelihood that they were actually going to attend. It's not that surprising, but the surprising point is they didn't have to get them to register for 20 classes and plan out their whole 4 year, just one class. If they could get them to just register for one class. So they had this great insight, and that insight came from a marketer who was looking at all of this information. A marketer was trying to run a campaign and figuring out how to move more students into attending who had been accepted, and they came up with this insight. And so it wasn't some crazy analytics project. So this marketer had this insight, and they decided to take it one step further, and they took kind of a risky play. How many people in here do any marketing via SMS? Okay, a few. SMS marketing can be incredibly powerful, can also be incredibly risky. Jiffy Lube was sued for $47 million for doing SMS wrong. So 47 million little risks, I guess. And the folks at Laureate hadn't really done much there, but they were thinking, the group of folks they're marketing to, that's a perfect way to engage in this via SMS. And so instead of just launching some big SMS campaign, it was all about using the right channel at the right time and just pushing a small set of folks over the edge. So they looked at this group of students that said, you've put down a deposit, but you haven't registered for a class yet. You're not responding to emails. You're not really coming to the website. You generally look disengaged. Maybe the right thing for this group to provide that great customer experience is to send an SMS if they're not responding and try and nudge them over the edge to register. And it worked. And this wasn't some grand scheme of marketing campaign. This was one marketer who had all the insights she needed from this single view of the customer and acted on those insights with the right campaign to drive results. And when you've got every marketer in an organization doing that to provide the best customer experience, that's how this starts to work. Now, there are a couple other stats I want to share. I mentioned that we look across the entire customer base, and we can glean some insights as to what productive and effective organizations are doing that other organizations are not doing. And when it comes to learning, there are 3 areas that we see folks doing a lot of. Number 1, high-performing organizations, so upper right versus everyone else, high-performing organizations are measuring 64% more often. So we can look at that, we look at the results, and then we come back and look at how many reports and queries they're actually running. Constantly learning, 64% more often. Those same organizations are 70% more likely to test. So if you don't know the answer to something, go ahead and test. Always this mode of learning. And then last but not least, when they invest hours in learning, actual education, whether it's learning about their customers or actually learning, taking professional development, it's a broad study on productivity, this is in our data, they saw a 5x return on that. So 5x the return for every hour invested in learning. So this concept of dedicating the time to seek answers and learn instead of just running the same way we have over and over again pays huge results. Last but not least, my favorite part of the presentation, because more puppies and babies, engage. It's been a common theme here, at least for most of today that I've seen, around the concept of engaging and storytelling as it comes to engaging. And it turns out there's a really good reason for that. 92% of customers want brands to tell them stories. When it comes down to actually engaging someone, they want it to be a story, but it's not just any story. If it was, we would literally all just go license movie trailers and send those to our customers, because those are great stories, but that's not what's happening. Customers want stories, want brands to create stories. But to be the kind of story that really works for you and for your customer, it has to satisfy 3 things. It has to be relevant. It can't just be your story. It has to be your story in a way that is relevant to the audience. It has to be personal. It has to connect with somebody on a personal level. The difference between a brand message and a story is that it connects with them personally. And it has to be timely. It has to be delivered at a time when someone can actually consume the story. And so many times we may have the most amazing story in the world about a product, a service, our brand, something that we're trying to deliver, and it misses on just one of these, and it doesn't get through. We might think it's relevant, but if the audience doesn't, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't align with some personal challenge they're facing or opportunity they're seeking, doesn't matter. If it gets delivered at a time when they're not ready to consume it, it doesn't matter. And so we have to focus on delivering relevant, personal, and timely stories. And I've got another great example, one of my favorites from a customer, the American Kennel Club. How many people in here have heard of the American Kennel Club? You must all be dog breeders. Unlikely. The American Kennel Club is mostly known for managing all of the breeds in the US, and they have obviously a very strong reputation there, but they have a lot of other products and services. They wanted to build a strong brand with the consumer audience. They wanted to become a resource for anybody who was a dog owner. And one of the things they realized as they went through this process was that there's a very timely moment when they could engage with dog owners, and that's when they get a new puppy. Anybody that has had a new puppy knows that when it is crying at 3 o'clock in the morning that first night, you will read just about anything to get it to shut up. Very timely. And AKC, in a nicer way, kind of realized that. And so what they did is they developed their marketing campaigns and started telling their brand story to those owners aligned to the puppy's growth milestones. You know, get a puppy at 10 or 12 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're trying to housebreak the puppy, and then they're chewing on things, and then they need behavioral training, and on and on and on. Most puppies go through a similar set of milestones, and AKC realized that and started to align their marketing efforts to that. Incredibly timely. Of course, it's relevant and personal to the folks that have just purchased this puppy, and as AKC did that, they saw the incredible engagement amongst this audience who may or may not have really known as much about AKC's products and services, but you can't get any more timely than delivering a campaign when someone's trying to solve this problem or crack this nut of how to train and develop this puppy. There's one more example that I would share with you. I assume the video is still not working, but that's okay. I will talk through it. I'll click one more time and just ignore it. So there's this commercial that I'll describe because many of you may have seen it. And I had the video here, but it didn't work. It's no big deal. This is the commercial where it's for Iams Pet Food. And this is the story where there's this young kid and they get a new dog, and the dog's name is Duke, this black lab. Any of you guys seen this commercial? Like, gets some head nods. So he gets this dog. He's 3 or 4 years old, and they name the dog Duke, and he starts calling the dog Duck because that's all he can say at that point. And it shows him go through his entire life, this next 15 years with this dog, and it's milestones of him going to the beach with the dog and going to prom with his girlfriend, and the entire time he's calling the dog Duck because that's all he could say. He just grew up with this dog called Duck, even though its name was Duke. And it gets to the end, and this girl that he's courting, for lack of a better phrase, asks him, why is your dog's name Duck? And he tells this whole story about how it was Duke, but he couldn't say it. I can't quite do it justice, but tears are often involved anytime this commercial comes up. And the reason for a lot of folks that even though it's a mass marketing campaign, the reason it resonates with so many people is that it hits on all three of these. Anybody that has had kids and a puppy at the same time has probably been through some set of experiences like this. Watching the two grow up together is one of the best things to watch in the entire world. And of course, that story is particularly relevant and personal and timely to me. More puppies and babies. This is to build a little bit on and end with a story that has been my life for the last couple of years, watching these two come together. You saw a picture earlier from the first year of my son's life when the dog was incredibly skeptical. Well, imagine for a second we've got this the kind of the family room in our house is where we hang out most of the time. I've got this U-shaped couch where my wife and I kind of sit on opposite sides of it because the magic left years ago. And I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I'm glad you're paying attention. Heidi probably knows my wife. Don't tell her. Just kidding. Yeah, it's out of the. Just don't tweet it. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So we truly sit on opposite ends of the couch because we've been playing defense for the last 2 years. And so if you imagine we have we're sitting on opposite ends of the couch, and for the first year of our son's life, he was generally with us, and then he started to kind of get a little bit more mobile, and the dog was always at our feet over on this side. And she's not a small dog, as you can see. She's about 100 pounds. Our toddler, not 100 pounds, it turns out. And so he would always be kind of over here playing in his area, and he started to become more and more mobile. Luckily, you can tweet this part, he was fat and slow. He's not nearly, he's much faster and not as fat now. But he was, like as a kid, he was a large boy. So he wasn't moving around a lot until like the first year of his life. But then he started to realize he really wanted to move. And so he starts getting closer and closer to the dog. And so for the span of like 3 or 4 months, he's crawling around, and the dog would kind of give this skeptical look over her shoulder, kind of like this one. And he would come up, and before he ever got there, she would get out of there and just like get in another room. Didn't want anything to do with it. And then another few months go by, and she stops doing that quite so much. She's not getting out of there. Instead, she just starts kind of snapping at him. So at this point, my wife and I are really playing defense, and we think she's just toying with us. Like, we don't actually think she's going to eat the child. We were pretty sure anyway, but we're on guard all the time. And so then, fast forward another 3 months, and he's walking around, and he's like, not balanced, falling everywhere, I guess is how I would put it, including towards the dog. And she just stops moving one day, and all of a sudden she finally realized that he's not there to completely torment and hurt her. He's there because he just wants to be friends with her. And so she stopped moving, and from that moment on, he would fall next to her. She started to love it, and this became a much better representation of their relationship. And when it came down to seeing the Iams commercial with Duck, which you should all go and look up, there's nothing more relevant, personal, and timely to me because I'm at the beginning of that journey watching my son and my dog start their next 10 years together. And so the power of a relevant, personal, and timely stories isn't just for consumer brands, and it isn't just for puppies and babies, but is powerful for all brands. In conclusion, let me share one last thing with you. If you're thinking a little bit about how challenging it is to expand the scope of what you're thinking about on a daily basis, to move beyond the process of acquiring customers and trying to think about how you can engage them more deeply across every touch point. One of the things we look at is when we bring new customers into Marketo, where are they in that journey? Because there's this feeling out there among marketers that everybody is in the upper right quadrant. Everybody's doing an amazing job. We're the only ones that are not doing an amazing job. My company makes it hard. My organization makes it hard, blah, 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 blah. I'm here to tell you that is absolutely not true. In fact, when we look at everything that's in these 4 quadrants, you can imagine, look at it on 2 vectors. How much experience do they have trying to engage their customers? And what's the scope of what they're trying to do next? And if they don't have a lot of either, they're just kind of starting out, that's great. If they've done it for a while and they just want to do the next thing, that's good too. If they're in the upper right-hand quadrant, they're like, we've done this amazing job and we're going to go do an even more amazing thing next. That's great. And then, down here, there's the folks who haven't really done it before, but they realize they've got to change. Big digital transformation type projects. The good news is, not everybody is in the upper right-hand quadrant. In fact, almost everybody is pretty equally represented in one of these groups. And so I leave this with you to only say that everybody can do this. This isn't about trying to take on some huge, enormous project. What this is about is taking up the torch, being a marketer who thinks about engaging your customers at every turn and picking the first place that you want to go do that. Where can you start to spend a little bit more time, effort, and energy with your customers and delivering that customer experience and not just your prospects? Thank you very much.